Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this parallel session of 4 lightning talks. My name is Michelle Khan. I'm chairing the session on data stewardship and training. Just a reminder before we get started, please to keep your cameras and your microphones off while the presenters are speaking so that we don't get any feedback or background noise. If we have time at the end, we'll take some questions, but the best thing to do while you're listening is to post questions in the Q&A tab on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll try and get to them before the end, or the presenters can answer them in that Q&A section. So let's start immediately. Our first presenter is Nadia Terzieva, who is presenting her paper on improving digital competencies of Bulgarian academic librarians. Nadia, over to you. Oh, I'm sorry. Nadia, are you there? We tested this presentation with Nadia just a minute ago, and she was able to present. I'm wondering why she's disappeared.
You hear me now?
We can hear you. Thank you, Nadia.
Okay.
You just need to share your screen.
Okay. You hear me? You see the screen?
We see it.
Okay. Let's start again. I'm going to present on behalf of my colleagues a presentation for improving digital competencies of the Bulgarian academic libraries. The presentation will cover a few words for Bulgarian Information Consortium, then just very brief of a history of study, comments on the results of 3 key questions, and finally, I will present the digital program idea. So the lightning talk is based on the national survey conducted by the Bulgarian Information Consortium. BIC was founded in 2002 year by a New Bulgarian University, which is the first non-government university after transition in Bulgaria. The mission of BIC is to provide the best information resources at the best possible price to Bulgarian libraries and their users. Currently, more than 70% of the academic libraries in Bulgaria are members of BIC. The consortium aims to simplify and improve licensing arrangement and maximize efficiency for member libraries. Another main goal of the consortium is to facilitate the lifelong education of librarians and to improve their professional competencies. The questionnaire consists of 20 questions with predefined answers, and some of them have the opportunity to give grades on 5, 6, and 9-point scales. The study was conducted over a period of 6 months among staff in 44 libraries, member of the consortium. It involves 10% of staff with predominance of women, age between 40 and 50 years, with professional experience between 60 and 20 years. So, about the question, we have selected for this presentation 3 key questions for comments. The first question, as a librarians, how do you acquire your digital literacy? It is interesting that 54% of the respondent librarians prefer self-preparation for acquiring their digital literacy. It is also 25% of prefer a formal education for acquiring their digital literacy. And finally, 37% of the librarians would like to extend their digital competency by attending seminars and conferences. The second question, how do you access your knowledge in the listed areas? 25% rate their knowledge in the field of electronic repositories and data warehouses with 6. And then 22% rate their knowledge with 8 in the risk of open access to scientific information, and 90% rate and evaluate their knowledge with 5 for design and implementation of technological solutions for the creation, storage, and distribution of digital content. The third question, do you need additional information and or training in the listed areas? 82% need information and training for design and implementation of technological solutions for the creation, storage, and distribution of the digital content. 71 to 78% are very willing to train for open access to scientific information, working with software products for content digitalization and for the digital content creation, copyright in the digital environment. And 69% still need to get more information and training in the field of electronic repositories and data warehouses. Following the analysis of the results, we created an educational program consisting of 4 modules. The program is expected to be implemented till the end of 2021 year by leading speakers in the country. And we do expect librarians from each institution member of the consortium to complete this program and to train the colleagues in their own institution on the basis of trainers. The first module, which is the engaging lectures for effective use of digital technology, will be focused on developing the ability to quickly assess the information needs of teachers and provide effective assistance in working with electronic information resources. It is very important for librarians in the frame of this model to know how to create and maintain the researcher's online professional profile in various web-based systems. Digital information and data curation in the name of the second module. It covers the problem of implementation of technological solutions for the creation, storage, and distribution of digital content. It also includes basics of managing electronic repositories and data warehouses, and it is important basic knowledge of computer security in the frame of this module. The third module, open access to information and copyright in the digital environment, covers a contemporary issue of copyright in the digital environment. It is also important in this model to include phenomenon of open access to scientific information, especially in the post-COVID-19 era. So the final model, number 4, it is professional workflow in using digitalization and digital content creation software. It covers all software identified by the survey, as well as a new product that become popular in professional circles. Finally, after completing the program, we are going to repeat the survey again in order to assess the librarian progress of knowledge. The study results will be presented on the national meeting of BIC and will be given an opportunity for sharing experience and need assessments for the future digital program development. That's all of me. Thank you very much for attention. Hello. Hello.
Thanks, Daniela. Thanks, Nadia. Sorry, I couldn't get
okay.
Thank you very much. If anyone has any questions for Nadia, please post them in the Q&A. We're going to move to our next presenter now, Daniela Housen, who's going to present on a community consultation on career tracks for data stewards. Nadia, if you could stop sharing your screen, we can give it to Daniela.
So
here we go. Now I'm it. Do you see it now?
We see it now. Thank you.
Perfect.
You may start.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the short introduction. So together with my colleague Maaike Jetten and Yang Bang from the Netherlands, as well as Claudia Kramer and Sibylle Hermann from Germany, we set up a Dutch-German cooperation on data stewardship and their career tracks. I will give you a brief overview about the background, the Dutch and German case studies, as well as our online interactive workshop at the International Fair Convergence Symposium, and about the data we collected and analyzed so far, and let you know about our next steps. Our group, and I think it's also like a lot of other groups, saw that there is still a lack of career tracks and that the responsibilities and tasks of data stewards depend on the organizational structures and needs. There are still examples missing of what a career track could look like. Facing these circumstances, we participated with an interactive workshop at the International Fair Convergence Symposium 2020, so last year. At this workshop, we had 45 participants, and we split up the career track topic into 4 subtopics like recruitment, profiles, training, requirements, and incentives. And in all these 4 subtopics, we were focusing on the challenges, motivation, and the changes. Our first expectations were that the outcomes may help local organizations and national initiatives to raise awareness and start or further develop their data stewardship program. So in the Netherlands, the topic data stewardship is embedded in the national program Open Science. Under the DOE, you can find more information about that. You see that there are still 8 universities involved, and we picked out here the example from the TU Delft.
Daniela, sorry to interrupt. Yes. We're not seeing your slides moving. We're just seeing your cover slide at the moment.
Okay, what can I do then? So because I'm moving the slides and I see the slides moving.
There we go. We can see case studies now.
Okay, but not in the full screen. Wait. Can you see now the slides moving?
We're seeing case studies, the Netherlands.
And do you see now from Germany?
Not yet, no.
Not yet. Okay, then I can't use the presentation mode. Okay, I will leave it as it is. Okay, great. So on the right-hand side, you see the example of the data steward from the TU Delft. And you see that that it's quite important there to have a PhD or an equivalent degree, and also that you need research expertise. They also are looking for the data stewards in their organization, about the training for data stewards and what are they learning on the job. And they are focusing on the strengths and challenges of this model. Okay, so the approach from Germany I will introduce here is coming from the TU9 university collaboration. We are still in the step here of analyzing the different tasks, activities, and skills the data stewards are having in the technical universities in Germany. We realized that a data steward is also someone like at the TU Delft with research experience and in a minimum with a master degree, and that the data stewards are supported in different ways and also located at different points at their universities. So coming now to our interactive word cafe we did at the workshop. So far in the workshop, we were running breakout sessions, one on each topic. So recruitment, profiles, training requirements, and incentives, as I mentioned before. So all the topics were broken down into challenges, motivation, and changes. And we had various steps in these Word Cafe. First, the participants wrote down their answer to the questions. In the second step, the participants vote for the answer someone else gave with smileys. And in step 3, the group discussed the top most voted answers. At this slide and also on the next slide, you can find our questions. So we adapted the questions to the categories. So for challenges, for example, in recruitment, we asked from which group could data stewards be recruited. And in profile, we adapted it to which background to bring along, master or bachelor degree, scientific or information specialists. The same we did the same here. So with training requirements, here's the challenge question adapted, which skills, soft skills are required, and the same for incentives. What are incentives for a university when establishing data steward jobs? So what we got out of the workshop, we started after the workshop the data analysis, and in the data analysis we saw that in the part challenges, mostly the expertise and much more skills were mentioned. So we concluded this subtopic to it's hard to get someone with adequate skills and expertise. And in the motivation part, the participants mentioned many times the organization. So it could help if data stewardship is recognized and rewarded. They also mentioned skills in the way that data stewards should feel more secure when they are skilled and trained enough. And in the last part, the changes, the organizations were addressed as well. They still have the power to change their structure and help in recognize and rewarding data stewardship. So to summarize our workshop, here we go. So we still have the category useful skills for data stewards. So here we got examples like cooperation, communication, and networking skills. But there were also mentioned the data skills, so understanding the FAIR principles, and also the language skills, so translating and mediating between the different persons in the project. And in the expertise part, they are the ones who are quite, want to have a researchers. It only depends on the level, so from early stage careers to PhD students, but or to postdoc researchers. Sorry for that. But they also would recruit a professional with RDM expertise. And in the required organization support, it shows the actional position of RDM expertise should be included, reflected into grant applications. And this is going up to permanent positions in the future for data stewards because they are not regularly permanent yet. Also important is that data stewards are recognized by the HR department and from top management so that they can support them and hire them, and that we should carry out the advantages, the credits for research quality and transparency where data stewards can support.
Daniela, can I ask you to wrap up? I see you on your last slide.
Yes, this is the last slide. So I'm coming to the end of my presentation. You see, we had a great workshop. We got a lot of information, but there is still some information missing, and we really like you to help us. So we set up a survey, which is running by the end of May. So feel free if you like to help us with this on any topic. If you want more information, please contact us or join us at the RDA poster booth. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniela. Time is running out on us, so I'm going to ask Maaike Jetten to start sharing her screen, going to present on professionalizing data stewardship in the Netherlands.
Just checking, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay, perfect. So thank you. I'm presenting on a project we conducted in the Netherlands. It was a national report on professionalizing data stewardship, and I'm doing this on behalf of my colleagues who are referenced on the final slide of my presentation. So in this talk, I'm going to give an analysis of data stewardship in the Netherlands and draw attention to the need for a nationally coordinated action. And we figured that the active steps we are taking in the Netherlands could also inspire others to take similar steps or learn from the steps we are taking. So I'm referring to a call for action by Barend Mons, one of my colleagues, who says in a recent Nature publication that if we invest 5% of our research funds into ensuring that data are reusable, this is excellent return on investment. So we should indeed hire data stewards to help the researchers to do the job in a joint collaborative effort, and this will make open science possible and will make research more efficient at the same time. So the route to open science has three aspects. The first aspect is the policy, regulation, and allocation of budgets aspect, and particularly the later aspect is really important, so including the budgets. Then there is the second dimension, which includes research infrastructures and services. And then, of course, to make this all possible, we need to facilitate a cultural change in research and research support communities. And as you can see in the picture on in the screen, that in the middle are open science and fair data. So from the Dutch National Program Open Science, abbreviated AMPOS, there are 3 key areas that the program works on. The first one is 100% open access publishing. The second one is optimal reuse of fair research data. And the third one is corresponding evaluation and valuation systems. And the report I'm presenting on today is part of the second key area, together with a report on the Dutch data infrastructure and services landscape. What we did in the Netherlands is a joint effort, collaborative effort by more than 30 representatives of university medical centers, University of Applied Sciences, service providers, and various representatives of major Dutch umbrella organizations. So as we can say, this has a major impact, at least in the Netherlands. And we figure that it will also inspire others to take similar steps. So what we did in the report is built on 2 previous reports. The first one is one of our National Coordination Research Data Management, National Coordination Center for Research Data Management, which conducted a study on the various data steward task areas. You can see it on the left, and I will include the DOIs later in the chat, so you can browse the report as well. And on the right, you can see a similar report, but then more specifically on the various data stewardship roles, worked out in different competences, knowledge, skills and abilities, and learning outcomes. So these 2 reports conducted in 2019 inspired this year's report on professionalizing data stewardship, which is also resulted in a roadmap for the Netherlands on working towards professionalizing data stewardship. So you recognize this picture, because Daniela showed it as well. We were included in the Dutch-German collaboration and the workshop Daniela talked about. And this is exactly the same example. So TU Delft is one of our case studies that shows us a little bit of how the landscape on training and education in the Netherlands looks like. And it is a first fact check on data stewardship training and education. You can see both the profile of a data steward in the TU Delft University, and also a more elaborated reference card with elements on training and education at TU Delft. Another element of the report are in various annexes the basic data steward job profile component. So we conducted both for the data stewards in the universities, in university medical centers, and in the University of Applied Sciences. We elaborated on how a data steward job profile could look like. And what we've also did is, in the context of what in the Netherlands is referred to as the digital competence centers, is drafted out the role of the research software engineer, because in those digital competence centers, which are currently being established in most of the institutions in the Netherlands, both data stewards and research software engineers work together. And you can browse the report for the various annexes with all detailed information. Then the next step was to investigate on training, education and certification. So we did an inventory of training resources, we did an inventory of training certification mechanisms, and we did an inventory on how to collaborate in European context to make sure that certification is being progressed over the upcoming years. So ideally, all these aspects, so both the landscape and the competence and the training, education and certification, is collaborated together in what we refer to as a data steward skills tool. So we worked with the Competency Hub, an existing tool, to see how we could include all the knowledge that we gained and all the models that we drafted out into their Competency Hub tool. And what we drafted out was also 5 data steward personas to show how data stewards could benefit from such a tool and what the possible pathways they take could be. So what is a summary of the recommendations of our data stewardship report? And this is actually about implementing data stewardship in local organizations. So first step is to analyze local data stewardship case studies, just as the case studies that we have as example in the report, to clarify the needs of a local organization. The second step would be to formalize the data stewardship profile and stimulate local organizations to adopt these. Then, of course, this profile should reflect the required competences and should be sensitive to diversity in background, but also to expertise, roles, types, and a specific organization. And in the end, as was mentioned in the previous talk, also this should lead to secured positions and formal career tracks. Then we should collaborate locally and nationally in organizing training and develop certified curricula for data stewards. Further on, we should standardize metadata for training and education and create curated training resources, so to make those training efforts fair as well. And as mentioned already, we should create a data steward skills tool as a single point of reference for all those data steward competences, training and education. So my last slide is about the first steps towards implementation. So I've highlighted the term MPOS, National Program of Science, the FAIR data table. So this is an initiative building on the previous reports already mentioned, including the report on infrastructure and services in the Netherlands. And we are planning, based on the outcomes of the report, to get all relevant stakeholders around those FAIR data tables and talk about all the issues that we have been investigating in the report that I just explained. And in this slide, I give already quite some examples of the first implementation steps. So there are many references to the current report already. Local organizations are picking up the recommendations already, and we already added the competences into the competency hub that I just mentioned already. And what we already did is taking along or planning to take along the outcomes into current Dutch training efforts, both from a national perspective and from a local perspective. And a really highlight is that we were able to formalize data stewardship profile for the universities already. And in the next version of the formal profile system, the data steward job will be included. So I'm finalizing this talk with the acknowledgement. There is the reference to the report and a thanks to all the people or all the different organizations that collaborated and made this report into a huge success. And if you are curious about the report, if you want to talk with me, then please contact me and I'm happy to answer all your questions.
Thank you very much, Micah. We're going to move on to the last presentation, which is from Nicole de Michaelis on expanding the curation community of practice in Canada. The session might look like we're running out of time, but we will have enough time to for Nicole's whole presentation to play, so please hang around for that. Go ahead, Nicole.
Can you see it all right?
We can see it, yes.
My name is Nicole, and I'm speaking to you from the unceded Coast Salish territories, including those of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. I'm a curation officer with the Pan-Canadian RDM network Portage, and you'll also be hearing from my colleague Sabanya, who is also a curation officer. So just a quick 2-minute primer on what's going on with RDM in Canada. We recently created the new Digital Research Infrastructure Organization, bringing together various Canadian projects in advanced research computing, research software, and research data management, so that's us. We launched the Federated Research Data Repository, lovingly known as FERDR. This is the first fully curated repository open to all researchers affiliated with Canadian academic institutions. So both these initiatives reflect an effort to conduct broad needs assessment to suss out what a nationally coordinated approach to data curation might look like. As part of this needs assessment, one of the core objectives that came out of it was the desire to foster a community of practice. It seems almost universally recognized that this will be a combination top-down and bottom-up initiative. So the goal of fostering a community of practice is going to be vital to meeting all of our goals. In addition to some shared objectives, it also became evident that we have some shared concerns. Firstly, around coordination. Across Canada, people involved in data curation are looking for shared workflows, standards, and vocabularies. In addition, we're looking for guidance, training, and resources and tools, things to help give direction to people who might be at a smaller institution or might not have a full-time staff person devoted to data curation. Another major issue that is the equity and inclusion. So Canada is a bilingual country. We have English and French as our national languages, which means as a pan-Canadian organization, we are obliged to publish everything in 2 languages. But even beyond that, Canada is a very diverse and multilingual country. And our goal is to make these resources accessible to as many people as possible, which means as many languages as possible. Similarly, we have issues around Indigenous data. So how do we respect the data sovereignty of these nations while still being the best data stewards and adhering to best practices whenever we can, or as close as possible? And lastly, a culture and awareness. Specifically, one of the main themes is people struggling to communicate the value of curation to people who might be outside the field or even within the field, but just not immediately involved in the work. We also have some shared solutions. We recently published the Dataverse Curation Guide, which is a community-built bilingual step-by-step guidance for new data being deposited in Canada's 55 plus institutional Dataverse repositories. And this is important because this guide was actually founded as a bilingual document. It was written in English and French instead of just being written in English and translated. So this is a big step. Another thing we created recently is the Curation Commons. It's an online space for RDM and curation practitioners to share resources and tools that they discover related to the practice of data curation, instead of us just creating a resource guide. And most recently, we have the community calls. These are modeled after the Australian Research Data Commons community of practice and reflect that desire to grow that community of practice. It's a bit of an unspoken truth that we all learn to do our job around the water cooler. Like, formal training has its place, but it's these collective informal settings that often provide space for critical discussion, interdisciplinarity, and learning-centered thinking and social innovation to take place. We all belong to communities of practice, a number of them usually. As Wenger wrote, communities of practice are groups of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. So that could be a gardening group or a professional network or a group of colleagues who just meet semi-regularly to bounce ideas off each other. Most of these kinds of communities just arise organically, but in this scenario, we are actually trying to actively foster a community of practice by addressing shared concerns with shared solutions. So we hope that this kind of community will inspire curators to build new connections, share challenges and achievements, and further work together to create a knowledge base and resources that will benefit the collective. So far, we've hosted 3 community calls this year, and these are informal online gatherings through Zoom that have different themes each time, so they present some sort of different value. First, our first call focused on appraisal for curation. Second, for research ethics and consent, specifically around consent forms and how those play into the curation process. And our most recent call was a cross-border collaboration. So we had the American Data Curation Network and the Canadian Portage Network looking for spaces of collaboration where we can work together. So far, each of these sessions has followed roughly the same model. We invited guests with expertise outside of data curation to start the conversation, and they deliver a short presentation, and then we turn it over to the group. So we've been super fortunate to have a really high level of interest in these sessions. So this has taken the form of breakout rooms for the most part, just so it's small enough that everyone feels comfortable speaking, or hopefully feels comfortable speaking. This has also allowed us to have a French breakout room where French is the primary language spoken, which is important because our first community call, the presentation that was delivered was actually bilingual. We also maintain collective notes. So from each breakout room, the discussion is summarized, and we put together in one set of notes that are sent out to all registrants.
As we develop this community of practice, we've run into some challenges and ongoing questions. Some of these include, how do we create an inclusive professional community while still keeping the focus narrow enough to be helpful? How do we keep these spaces collaborative instead of prescriptive? How do we reach out and connect with curators and data management professionals outside of the traditional academic institutions? And how do we avoid replicating systemic power structures that are in our field? And what actions can we take beyond stating just inclusive values without asking for more labor from marginalized voices? Next slide, please. So we wanted to think about how the community of practice model can work toward answering some of these questions. One of the major concerns around our work is rising precarity. Precarious employment in general is on the rise in Canada, and certainly within library work. Many studies note that precarious workers both in and out of libraries are disproportionately likely to be people of color, women, and LGBTQ individuals. Often we look at diversity in terms of the numbers, but within that we don't consider who's temporary, contract, part-time, who's overworked, or even consider the stressful nature of doing precarious work. This means that diversity on its own is not enough to consider, and more of a commitment is needed, as precarity also acts against any type of long-term work towards equitable treatment and inclusion. Next slide, please. So while communities of practice may not structurally be suited to fight against rising precarity, it can certainly be mobilized to help with the stress of doing precarious work. A community of practice can be mutually beneficial for younger entry-level professionals, as well as those who are more experienced. It can be structured in a way to help younger professionals, especially those coming from communities that are not highly represented, because it allows them to network and gain confidence in the profession. During our calls, we also try to make room for people to share similar challenges that we're all facing. And this sort of attempts to mitigate the stress and isolation that comes from perhaps working as singular data professionals within our institutions. For example, during our community call on research ethics, many expressed insecurities about working with consent documents. And because of this, we realized we needed more training on this and try to think of ways that we could facilitate that. So as we're developing our community of practice, this also leads us to question on how we can make space during these calls for those who are more precariously employed. How do we further support entry-level professionals and make sure we're including them? So in the quote, Schoenberg notes, toxic individualism creates conditions in which precarity grows. Precarity depends on keeping people separated and focused on taking care of themselves above all else. It structurally privileges those labeled as white-enabled. She also further argues that library burnout is connected to unstable working conditions and a culture of individualism and expectations of resilience. There's this prevailing idea that we should be able to do more with less resources and no help, and the pressure is on the individual to resolve these problems rather than sort of a collective solution. And there's an idea that problems of burnout can be fixed through individual persistence. So community care is the opposite of toxic individualism. By focusing on the bigger picture of our communities, we can see that we're not alone and we can help each other face similar problems. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the idea of community of practice was introduced in the early 90s, and its benefits have been reported extensively. And as Nicole mentioned earlier, it's also recognized as an important facilitator for knowledge sharing that is ultimately important for organizational learning at large. However, I think as we're in the beginning stages of developing our community of practice, we wanted to start exploring the ways in which the process of building communities of practice for curators and librarians can be mobilized to work against the pervasive implications of job precarity and burnout that act as professional barriers against equitable inclusion. So I think we're currently left in a place where we have more questions than answers, but researchers have also noted that successful communities of practice are ones that are dynamic, interactive, and fluid to the needs of the community. So we will definitely be continuing to explore these questions with our communities as it grows. During our next call, actually, we're planning on taking a more self-reflexive approach as we're seeking feedback on how we want to expand the audience, the structure, whether it's working, topics of interest, and we're going to continue having these conversations as we move forward.